What's going on, guys? It's another edition of Stateside Footy, and of course, today is the Sunday Spurs Conversation. And of course, after yesterday's performance against Brighton, I gotta say, man, I came away 100% positive and motivated for the last 5 matches throughout the rest of the season. And of course, it will be an absolute gunfight for the last 5 matches, as Spurs are in a position where, man, they're going to have to fight for it. But that being said, with yesterday's point, I wouldn't necessarily say we're out of it just yet. And of course, Adrian's over there in the chat going bananas over there. Apparently, Forrest won, but that wasn't necessarily a surprise. What's up, Adrian? Big up to you in the chat as well. And of course, for this Sunday Spurs conversation, I had to reach out to my man Billie T. Because you know what, we need some level-headed and some calm reactions. Because all you have to do is take a look at Spurs social media, and it seems like everybody wants somebody to blame for yesterday's equalizer. But that being said, I don't necessarily think there really should be blame, considering I thought the performance was actually absolutely terrific from the lads. So Billy, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Good to speak to you again. Always good to talk to you. And mixed feelings at the moment. Mixed feelings. It's a lot of emotion either side.
Sure.
It's everything feels so important at the moment. Every single game feels huge. There's a massive amount of emotional sort of connection going into it, and it's a lot to take for fans. I can see why some fans are, on the angry side, but personally, I think yesterday gave a little bit of hope, even though we didn't win the game. But the performance certainly did, and we're definitely up against it. It's an uphill battle now. It's almost like a mountain to climb at this point, but it's not over. And until it's over, I will keep going, and I will keep being positive. So I will keep that hope until it's over, because otherwise, what else could you do as a fan?
I know, I completely agree. But, before we begin, I do want to ask everybody out there to make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button, and also hit that notification bell, man. Hook your boy up. Don't be afraid to hit that sub, and also hit that like and notification bell, because we have some pretty cool stuff coming up in the next couple weeks. Again, as we get ready to get to the end of the line, there's going to be a lot more Spurs content coming out, as well as U.S. men's national team content. So please do me a favor and hit that notification bell and that sub, and just hook a boy up. All right, quickly before we do it, I do have to send out a quick shout out, man. I got to throw some love to my guy Pellegrino Matarazzo. Yesterday, Real Sociedad wins their first Copa del Rey in quite a long time. As a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time they actually hoisted that trophy. And the only reason why I'm mentioning that is because Pellegrino Matarazzo becomes the first U.S. coach to lift a European trophy of any sort. And that's absolutely huge, considering that I think globally U.S. coaching really kind of takes a backseat. And I don't think a lot of people take it seriously. So we at least have one dude out there in Spain planning the stars and stripes right there at midfield with Real Sociedad. So man, I'm really super proud of that. And hopefully Europe takes notice, because this dude seems to have the secret sauce. As Real Sociedad looked like they were going down, not so much. So congratulations. And hopefully he gets that move to a bigger club, because I think he's definitely earned it. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, Billy. Yesterday, here's the thing. I saw our best performance of the season yesterday. And what I mean by that, it's like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, we had some pretty wonderful results in the Champions League, at home against, Borussia Dortmund. We've had some pretty good matches outside of the Premier League. But since the calendar has turned into 2026, we have progressively gotten to a point in the Premier League where we don't even look recognizable anymore as a club. And of course, we've had coaching changes, and I think it was interesting that coming into it, I dug a little bit. We actually hadn't scored 2 goals in a winning effort in the Premier League since we beat Brentford at home back in the early portion of December. And so from that standpoint, we were kind of up against the wall. But yesterday, from a fighting standpoint, this team really just went absolutely crazy. And in certain points of the game, we absolutely dominated possession. And there was a time where after we scored that first goal, had a quarter of an inch the other way, all of a sudden Xavi probably would have gotten the second, and all of a sudden we're cooking with gas. As it being, we didn't necessarily get it. We equalized. They equalized right at the end of the first half, but again, this team didn't drop their heads, and I thought the performance overall was absolutely quite motivating. And if fans are looking for signs, it's like, from a performance standpoint, this is exactly what we're looking. And considering that this season we've been absolutely dog shit at home, I gotta say, man, I was absolutely thrilled to see that performance yesterday, and clearly Roberto De Zerbi has had a massive impact with this group of players, because we didn't get it under Thomas Frank, and we certainly didn't get it under Igor Tudor. But that being said, man, it was quite nice to see the lads out there, fighting and scrapping for every inch. And and when you consider what Brighton came into this match looking forward, because 3 points would have put them in a European spot, at least temporarily. So they actually had a lot to play for in this game as well, too. Not to mention that we're a struggling club, so that you would probably assume they got their ears pinned back coming into this match in a stadium where we're just typically not good at. And all of a sudden they had a rude awakening, because it's not like, it's not like of Tottenham months prior. We showed up for this one. And from that standpoint, I was absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was in the stadium yesterday, and it felt like the first Tottenham performance for a very long time, certainly all season anyway. And the result is really hard to take. The performance, there's a lot to take from it, though. And in the light of day, it could be something which we can build on for the rest of the season. And obviously, by the rest of the season, I mean, it's crazy to think that there are 5 games, and that's no time at all. But it's something to build on at least. And the result hurts, but the performance doesn't. And we were attacking well. I really like the lineup as well. Benton, Kurbisuma, and Xavi. It was nice to see some attacking players on the pitch, and really going for it. And the more attacking players you can get on the pitch, the better. So, all 3 of those midfielders and Gallagher, it's an attacking side that he played there, and we've been waiting for that for a long time. So I'm happy with the performance. The result really hurt, really, really hurt. I think if we'd have won that game, it would be a completely different outlook. But you can't give up. There's something to build. For the first time in a long time, it feels like there's something to build on at least. And we've got to take that into the 5 games. We can't give up. And, we are relying on other teams in a big way at the moment. We're 5 points behind Forest now, and we could be 5 behind West Ham as well, or 4 behind West Ham, whatever it will be tomorrow if they win. But we just got to try and do our thing and hope that we get the best. And we've got 2 very winnable games coming up, Wolves and Leeds.
Yep.
We should be able to win both of those games. And I left the stadium feeling like there's something to build on at least. It was a gut punch, but there's something there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like I don't look at this as a situation where we have to look for somebody to blame in this situation, because for the first time in a long time, I think De Zerbi got the lineup right. But that being said, it's like, also think about it in context of the fact that in the Premier League, we haven't actually had to hold a lead in quite a long time, right? It's a situation that we're not necessarily used to, right? Where we're considering the situation we're in and the pressure that we're under, and all of a sudden, not only do we fight back to take the lead, but now we're also trying to get that third at the same time, still trying to be organized at the back end. And from that standpoint, like, I can't necessarily blame Kevin Danso in that situation, because it was a 1v1 challenge that he absolutely lost. Granted, it's at the absolute wrong time to lose those type of challenges. But that said, in the context of the fact that this team just hasn't been in this situation in quite a long time, I wonder if they got a little nervy right there at the end.
I think so, and it just shows you how crazy football is. Just one little error like that can end up costing you, and an accumulation of those errors, if we do get relegated, might send us down. How many games have there been this season where we've been under it because of individual errors? It's really disappointing. But I'm not going to abuse Danso. I'm not going to sit there and say that Danso's the reason why we're getting relegated, because he's one of the players that stood up and fought for this team. So for me, that speaks a lot. And I think we have to rally behind these players at the moment because they are, yesterday proved they are trying to do everything to try and keep us up. And it was disappointing, but, that's this level of football. You make one mistake and it's pounced on. If you're watching the two best teams in the Premier League play at the moment, Donnarumma's just made a massive howler. You watch the Champions League in midweek, Neuer, one of the best goalkeepers of all time, makes an error. It happens, and you just have to deal with it. And it happens to us a lot this season, but, that's football.
I 100%, and I completely agree. But the interesting thing about it was that coming into this one off the backs of that loss in Sunderland, I looked at I was again kind of miffed a little bit about the lineups, the lineup pick. But that being said, it actually ended up proving to be proven to be very advantageous for this club. And I kind of want to get into the effect of Roberto De Zerbi because it looks like his imprint on this club has come very quickly. And I like some of the things that he's been doing. I think he took the club out for like a unification dinner, that type of thing. And the positive reinforcement with these players that maybe some of these guys have had confidence issues. And all of a sudden you kind of look at from where he started to where we are now, what do you think of the De Zerbi effect? And, from that standpoint, what specifically has it been that he's been able to come in where Thomas Frank had 8 months and it just didn't work, and Tudor, he came in and it just didn't work. What about Roberto De Zerbi that he was able to come in and literally just get these players that have been underachieving all of a sudden moving in the same direction?
Well, I have to say, if you'd have asked me this question after the Sunderland game, I would have been pretty mixed on it and thought, actually, he's not really done anything yet. But a game later, it's funny how much can change, isn't it? Another week on the training ground. We just looked so much better, so much more coherent in attack. There was patterns of play. There was attacking. There was overlapping. It was just a really clear attacking performance for once. And let's make no mistake about it. Brighton are a really well-organised team. They're a really good team. They are the form team in the Premier League at the moment. They've won 5 out of 6. They're now unbeaten in, they've only lost one game recently to Arsenal, which anyone watching that game knows how difficult that was. They beat Liverpool recently. They're a really decent team, but we were able to attack against them for the first time in a long time. And I think what he's done is given players a little bit more confidence back. He's also, I think, seems like he's got the gravity of the situation finally seems to be onto the players. I don't know if you saw when they got substituted, Bentancur and Basuma were on the sidelines trying to coach the game almost. Like everyone was really trying to do stuff here. And I think, there was definitely evidence of some coaching in that game. I was worried after the Sunderland game because there wasn't. And I have to say as well, I've been no secret the fact that I wasn't a fan of De Zerbi for some of the things that he said in the past. He's apologised for that. Move on as a football club. I have to say I've liked the way that he's spoken about Tottenham in press conferences. I like his quotes that he said recently. He seems to be, he's not, he's always bigging up the players and things like that. He's saying, I think we can go and win the next 5 games. He's not moaning. He's not. Sometimes with De Zerbi, you get that sort of anger and where he's trying to blame everyone else, and that's what ended up happening at both Marseille and Brighton, and eventually he quit both those teams essentially. But at the moment, I'm quite impressed with his outlook in press conferences recently.
Yeah, here's the thing, Billy. To me, it was much to do about nothing because coaches are going to back players, even if maybe personally they're, maybe those players aren't necessarily their cup of tea. And when I looked at that entire situation, that's kind of my read for it. And I understand that some fans were a little upset for it because, in the process of taking pressure off a player, maybe some people will look at it as like they're co-signing for that player, or potentially what that player may or may not have done in his personal life. Me personally, I didn't necessarily get that impression. That being said, it is what it is. But one of the things that I appreciated was the fact that he was able to step up in public and say, "Hey, listen, I apologize. And if some of you guys are offended, it is what it is. This is the situation. But that being said, this isn't about me. It's about the club, and we still have work to do." And I actually kind of appreciated it from that standpoint, where it's like he's not going to let that be the focus of what the task is at hand.
Definitely, and he, and it was good that the club addressed that first thing. And like I say, I've been impressed with the stuff that he's come out of in press conferences recently. I think he definitely has the right mentality, and he's definitely a manager that whatever way it goes, if we stay up or go down, and I think there are a couple of question marks if we go down whether he will still be here. I know the club says he will be, and he says he will be, but is a manager of that caliber really going to be managing the Championship? Only time will tell. But if he's still here in summer, either way, this is the kind of manager I think that you can really get behind and build a team around, and give him the keys essentially to this football club, because the way that he plays football, his passion, he has a very modern outlook on the game. I think we've been stuck in the past sometimes with some of the defensive football we've seen this season, particularly under the previous two managers. This is a really modern coach. So even people like Pep Guardiola say influences me. So if you influence Pep, that's good in my book, because I want to see a progressive modern football manager. So if he's here in summer, I think he deserves a proper back-in. So I hope that's what we do.
Well, I don't think they have any choice, right? Because I think De Zerbi has 65 million reasons why he would stay, even if there is a drop down to the championship. I do, actually, because one of the things, if you're willing to sign a contract without an escape clause in your contract, knowing that there's 6 or 7 games left in the season, and there's a very good likelihood that you're going to get relegated because of the predecessors before you have put this team in such a bad position, and yet you're still willing to sign on the dotted line. I guess it shows, number one, the confidence that you have in yourself as a coach, because you're willing to bet on yourself, because you look at the roster and you're like, okay, there's something to work with here, and maybe if we can just get this thing organized correctly, that we're gonna potentially get the points. And even if we stay up by the skin of our teeth, to me, I think that shows a lot of character. And I don't think that he would do this, understanding that there still is a good potential, only to bail in the summer. I can't see him doing that. I really can't. And especially when you're looking at some of the younger players as well, too. I personally think that if we do go down, we still actually have the talent to come right back up.
And this is how the headspace of a fat football fan, isn't it? I've been looking at, for the past couple of weeks, pretty much since the Sunderland game, I've not given up totally, but I've almost resigned myself to being in the Championship and sort of trying to see the positives of what that might be like. And I kind of think in some ways, I'm not saying I want to be relegated, because I definitely do not. When we scored that second goal yesterday, it's the most I've celebrated a goal in years. I'm desperate to stay up. But if we do go down, there's almost a little part of me that thinks maybe this is what we need to really rebuild this football club. We need to get rid of everybody and start again from scratch.
Correct.
And just sort of keep people like Mikey Moore and the youngsters, get some other, people that actually want to be at Tottenham, get rid of everyone that doesn't, and have a proper rebuild where you say, it's almost like you're burning something to the ground before you start rebuilding it, rather than just putting an extension in a house. You're burning that house to the ground first and going from the ground up. And maybe in some ways that's what we need.
Yeah, and I think I might have mentioned this to you as well too. Is I actually think that there are certain times in a club's history where you actually have to strip it all the way down to the studs, because there are certain times where you end up spinning your wheels, where you're good, but you're not good enough to win the league, and you're not good enough to get into a Champions League spot, but you're not terrible to the point where you're going to be in a relegation battle. You're kind of just stuck as a mid-table team spinning your wheels. And I got the impression that over the course of the last 5 years, we kind of put ourselves in that situation. Like when you see the high of highs of what Pochettino was able to deliver, which was a Champions League final appearance. And at that stage, it's like a stick or twist moment where it's like you understand that if you spend X amount of dollars just to bring in a little bit more help, that this club can take the next step, and then all of a sudden you're winning trophies, you're winning big trophies, and maybe you get back to a Champions League final, and this time you actually win it. But instead, not only did Levy not stick, he twisted off of Pochettino, didn't bring in the necessarily help, and then we spun our wheels with Jose Mourinho, with Conte, and it got to the point where we are because not only did we not look at the bottom line of this club roster-wise, but we had this ego trip. Well, we're the big mighty Tottenham, right? To dare us to do, and we feel like we have the talent to compete. But that being said, we saw it. We saw exactly what this club absolutely was, and so from that standpoint, you're kind of looking at it like, yeah, this is actually a good time to reset, because we have a coach now who gets it, who understands exactly what this club is about, what this club should look like, and what the fans are expecting this club to be, as far as gameplay and just the overall vibe of the foundation and the history of what this club stands for. And so from that standpoint, when I'm looking at it, it's like, okay, cool. It's not ideal because we're going to take a financial hit right out of the gate. But that being said, it's like, listen, if a relegation means that Johan Lang is gone, Vinny Vinkandesham is gone, and the Lewis family takes a hard look and says, listen, we have to clean house, right? But we have a guy in Roberto De Zerbi who obviously is a very good coach, but he's also he's also plugged into certain circles where maybe he can also be useful in appointing a director of football that he can work well with, who understands his system and what we need to actually be successful within that system. And from there, we can move up. We can actually move up to a point where we actually have the right people in the executive box. So when we do make that jump back up to the Premier League, and when we spend correctly, that you're 100% right, we can actually build up from the studs up, and then all of a sudden we have our football team back. And sometimes it takes a relegation in order for that hard truth to actually kind of sit in. And so from that standpoint, it sucks, because we're going to have to go to Lincoln City, and we're going to have to go to Charlton Athletic, and we're going to have to go to Wrexham, and we're going to have to go to Millwall. Well, hopefully, maybe Millwall gets promoted, who knows? But you get what I'm saying. And it's like, it's not going to be ideal. But that being said, it's like, sometimes we have to clear the deck and strip it down for us to actually get our identity back. And you saw what happened to Villa when they went down 6 years ago, and all of a sudden now, they're a Champions League team, and who knows exactly what's going to happen with them. Maybe they compete, for a Premier League and get a trophy. But that being said, they're clearing away far better than they were 6 years ago. And they had to do it in order to become a better club. And so from that standpoint, man, I'm looking at this as a potential positive instead of potentially it being a negative.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny you mentioned Poch there, because he obviously spoke about a painful rebuild, didn't he? And we never really gave it to him. And what he was essentially saying there, if you listen to his words, is what we just spoke about there. We need to get rid of everyone and start again. And if you notice the very best worn clubs, people like Man City, and again, I'm not accounting for the fact that they are an oil club who have possibly cheated financially to get there, but I'm just talking about in terms of the football side, they're incredibly well run. And if you look at the team that they have now compared to the team they had a few years ago and had De Bruyne, Gundogan, and people like that, it's almost a completely new team. And the best teams, the very, very best and well-organized teams, and Alex Ferguson used to be the master of this, they rebuild every few years, and we don't tend to do that at Tottenham. We haven't had a proper rebuild. We held on to the Poch era players for far too long. Most of the players that have been here now were signed under Praschi a few years ago, and things have gotten really stale. So I think in some ways, that's why I think our captain Romero it's probably just time to move on, because he's been here for so long, and there's obviously so much tension, and that's why he's constantly calling out the board, which I agree with him for. But I think for a lot of these players, it might just be time for a completely fresh start for everybody, just to move on from this, because I worry that if we stay in the Premier League, if we're going by the history of Enoch and the Lewis family, what they'll probably do is they'll try and make by with a couple of signings like they did in summer, like they did in January, and then we could well be in this situation again next season. So it might just be best for a clean break and really a proper rebuild, behind De Zerbi, behind the new technical director of football. And if we did that with Dougie Freedman, by the way, who, ex-Crystal Palace, who's now in Saudi, I think that would be an amazing opportunity then to really, if you look at some of the players that he brought in from Palace from the Championship,
without doubt,
Elise, Eze, people like that, then it'd be perfect. It'd be a perfect opportunity to really crack on and go again. But having said that, I definitely want to stay in the Premier League if possible, but I'm just at that phase now where I'm trying to look for the positives if we do go down.
Yeah, what's funny is Dougie Freedman would be such an impactful signing in that executive tree. And if you remember back in 2010 when Crystal Palace went into administration, 3 years later they got the promotion. But when you look at what Dougie Freedman was able to do as a manager of Crystal Palace, where he brought in the dude from the striker from Brighton, who ended up being a 30-goal scorer. He brought in the Australian holding midfielder, who I think is a part of Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff now.
Jedinak,
Yeah, Millie Jedinak, yeah, and it's like, dude, he his eye for talent is unreal. Not only can he build a winner in the Premier League, but he can also build one in the Championship as well too. But also look at the foundational pieces that we already have in place, right? When you look at the Matisse Tell and the Mikey Moores, and you look at Archie Gray and Bergvall and Luka Vuskovic, and it's like you look at some of these young pieces that it's like, we actually have generational foundational building blocks already in house. And that's the reason why I'm like, okay, cool. It's like, it's not going to be ideal. Like, I certainly don't want to be in the Championship next year, but it's like, it's not going to hurt as much, understanding that you look at these young building blocks that are already in place. And it's like, yeah, all it requires is like one or two guys to be like, you know what, we'll be up next year anyways. So I'll stay for one season and we'll be back in the Premier League next year. They're going to take the idea that we're going to flounder in the Championship and pull a Sunderland where we get back-to-back relegations. Like, I've seen that as well too. It's like, you don't want to take that chance, because what happens if we get relegated again? It's like, dude, this is not going to be a Sunderland till I die situation, for Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, and I've my good friend Connor, I'm sure that and you speak to as well. We're in various group chats together. So, my good friend Connor did a rough financial analysis of this. And, Tottenham, even in the Championship, our revenue would be sort of, about £300 million a year, £250 million a year, somewhere around that. Currently this year it's up towards 600. But if we went down to the Championship, it'd be about 300, something like that. The average revenue in the Championship is 30 million. Like, we financially eclipse. We almost have more revenue than all teams combined in the Championship. So it's unprecedented, the amount, the sort of financial eclipse that we'd be going into there. When Aston Villa and Newcastle and teams like that went down, it was quite a shock. But this is something else. Like, this is on a financial level it's never been seen before. So you would imagine that we would hopefully come straight back up. Not that I would necessarily, always back Tottenham to make the right decisions for that to happen, but you'd imagine that we would.
Yeah, and also think about the fact that a lot of these players do have relegation clauses in their contract where they're not going to, essentially their weekly salaries will get cut in half. But think about the fact that we also have balloon payments that are a part of the relegation process.
And the Champions League money from this year as well to come.
That's exactly right. And so this isn't going to be your usual, relegation, just considering from a financial standpoint. We will actually have that wiggle room to bring in 5 or 6 players that may or may not necessarily be at the Premier League level. But would it strike me crazy if we ended up shopping in France or Italy to bring certain pieces over to come right back up? That wouldn't surprise me at all. We have a potential, especially with De Zerbi through the door. We actually have the potential to still attract certain players. It might not be Premier League level players, but it's not like we're going to be shut out from first divisions across Europe. Not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
And if we look at Tottenham historically, one of our sort of recruitment strategies that served us really well was signing the best players from the Championship. It's how we signed people like Gareth Bale. It's how we signed Jed Spence. It's how we signed Dele Alli, who was actually in League One, not even the Championship. We did it a lot when I was growing up as well. People like Michael Dawson, Andy Reid, Kyle Walker was from the Championship.
Wasn't Dele
was League One, I think, at the time. Yeah, he was MK Dons.
Yeah, Milton Keynes. Yeah,
you're
absolutely right.
So, Aaron Lennon was signed from the Championship. It's served us really, really well over the years. And, if that's the route that we go down just for one season, and then I'm sure we'll still be able to attract some players from foreign leagues, like you say, because, with De Zerbi as manager, you can definitely sell a project. So, I'm just trying to bright side it, essentially, because
here it is.
Yep,
here we go, right here, Adrian, and God bless Adrian with Spurs Diehards TTID, who says we can spend 85% of the total revenue under FFP rules with an added 30% leeway in the first year. That's 115%.
And when you consider our revenue is 500 million, we can spend 500 million. So there you go.
Yeah, for sure. But that being said, man, that is, as far as I'm concerned, man, that's a bridge that we'll cross when it's absolutely mathematical. In the meantime, this upcoming week, we have Wolves. And now, granted, we haven't necessarily historically been fantastic at the Molineux, And of course, last year under Ange Postecoglou, late in the season, we went to Molineux desperately in search of a need for 3 points, and we didn't get it. As a matter of fact, I think that was the Jet Spence game where he was absolutely just rubbish in that game. If I can remember, that team we were already in this situation where Ange had already committed to the Europa League, so he was rotating within the Premier League, and so from that standpoint, we weren't necessarily at full strength. But that being said, you would probably assume that we're going to see some variation of the starting 11 that we saw yesterday against Brighton. But that being said, is there a situation where we're going to see a potential James Maddison sighting this upcoming weekend against Wolves? Is this a good opponent for him to get back and get some minutes?
From what I know, from what I've heard, it's the Aston Villa game is more likely. He might be able to make a very small. I think at the moment he's on the bench for almost sort of morale reasons, and I can definitely see that for his sort of personality and leadership. I believe he's targeting the Aston Villa game to come back in, but that doesn't mean that he won't be able to play like 10, 15 minutes. And I think because of the performance and because of how it went, I think I don't think he'll make too many changes to the team. I think the only question marks that I would maybe make are. Do you bring in Tell for either Moani or one of the front three? Because I thought Tell was good when he came on yesterday. Again, I thought Moani was poor yesterday. To be honest with you, I have a few question marks over Solanke as well. I know he works really hard. His work rate is huge, but I think there's a case to put Richarlison in the team as well. So those are I think most of it. I think. Bissouma, Bentancur and Gallagher worked really well yesterday, and I think he'll probably stick with it. I think it's one of Gallagher's better games for us in a while. He was pressing all over the place, which I assume is why he was in the team. So I think the only question marks for me are will Tell and Richarlison come into the team?
Yeah, the interesting thing was I got to give a shout to Conor Gallagher, because yesterday I thought was his undeniably his best performance in a Spurs shirt. And I thought, his work rate coming into it, which wasn't really all that good outside of the second half against Manchester City at home. He's been essentially, persona non grata on the pitch. But yesterday I got to give him his flowers, because that dude was trying everything. He was going 1v2 in certain situations to try to keep that ball higher up the pitch, and his pressing ability was good. And he was just trying to be a nuisance. And I actually appreciated that. I actually appreciated his performance yesterday. And I actually think that should be a good sign for Spurs fans too, that have essentially written Conor Gallagher off as somebody that we've wasted money bring him in January. But that being said, I think in certain situations, considering like Thomas Frank essentially used him as a stay back holding midfielder. Same thing with Igor Tudor. So we never really got to see him further up the pitch in any situation. And of course, last week against Sunderland, the week prior against Sunderland, it didn't necessarily look all that great. But again, another week on the training pitch, and all of a sudden, Conor Gallagher. I'm not going to sit here and say he was Conor Gallagher at Chelsea or Palace, but that being said, we got a little taste of what it could look like if you're actually using him correctly. Yeah,
100%. And it's been there's no doubt about it. It's been a hugely disappointing signing, Conor Gallagher. He came with incredibly high wages. He's not looked good in the team so far. He's played a few different positions. I don't pity him. I mean, I do sort of pity him slightly, because he signed in January. He's had 3 different managers. Like, that's just unheard of, isn't it? That's crazy.
Correct.
He's had 3 different managers since January. He must be thinking, what on earth have I signed up to here? You go to a football club, and then within 4 months of signing, you've had 3 different managers. That just does not happen anywhere else in the world. So you can understand why it's taken him so long to hit the ground running. But yesterday was the first time where I thought, I could see why he was there. He was pressing him. I think De Zerbi, one of the things that I really hope about him, because his knowledge of the game is incredible. He's an absolute, emphatically obsessive over football. I think one of the big problems we've had, particularly under Igor Tudor and Thomas Frank, is the profiling of players and players playing in out position and all that. I remember when Igor Tudor put him on the right wing, which obviously he's not going to play there. So it seems like De Zerbi might have found a profile for him, which I think is important.
I would 100% agree. I'd also want to give a shout to Yves Bissouma as well too. Guy who was essentially frozen out He did make a couple appearances. I think it was under Thomas Frank right after the January, or even during the January window, where he had a couple decent performances. But again, he's been essentially left on the bench. And I was actually quite surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by Eve's performance. But that being said, that there's a player in him. When called upon in I guess you can say big situations. Last year, I think we saw that in the Europa League as well too, where all of a sudden Yves Bissouma looked like the player that we brought in when he was at Brighton. And so from that standpoint, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised with his performance. Of course, he takes the yellow, but whatever. I don't care about the yellow cards. But at the end of the day, man, I thought it was a very good performance, and I tend to agree with you. I think that's probably going to be the midfield three. Now, it's certainly from a passing standpoint, Billy. I don't think it's a dominant midfield by any stretches. But what I will say is that it seemed to work. It seemed to work better than any of the three combination that we have seen up to this point. And I think for me, that's kind of like a big red flag, because, in order for this team to get to that goal, first and foremost, the most paramount thing is scoring goals, right? This team has a problem with scoring goals just in general, let alone scoring multiple goals, per game. But that being said, one of the things that we're going to have to establish is some primary sense of, I guess you can say, stability inside those middle sections of the park, just for patterns of play as we're moving in. Because again, we sit deep, and again, we saw it against Sunderland, and we saw it again yesterday at certain points where Brighton was holding possession. We have 10 behind the ball, behind the midway line, and so when we actually win the ball back, it's not higher up the pitch; it's actually in our own end. And so from that standpoint, we actually have to essentially build up from those positions. And so counterattacking, it's not ideal for counterattacking purposes and from a build-up standpoint. And so from that standpoint, from all that being said, we have to be able to have good passing ability, and it's something that we lack in general. And so from that standpoint, I think we saw a little bit of it yesterday, that we're going to be able to at least get into decent situations to put shots on net.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's what we've been missing all season, isn't it? The attacking play under Thomas Frank was horrendous. Pretty much the entire season. Didn't improve much under Tudor. So, we're desperate for it. And I actually kind of think, we do have the makeup of our squad is sort of almost built towards this attacking football. We spent 2 years in 4 transfer windows building a squad for Ange Postecoglou. And then, funnily enough, we then hire a pragmatic defensive manager in Thomas Frank, and obviously it doesn't work out because you've just built a squad for a manager that plays incredibly attacking football, and it would have made so much more sense to go for a manager like De Zerbi after Ange Postecoglou. And that's my big problem with the direction of our football club and the director of football in Johan Langham. In the past year alone, we've gone from Ange Postecoglou to Thomas Frank to Igor Tudor to Roberto De Zerbi. There's just no coherence there whatsoever. You've got 2 very attacking managers in De Zerbi and Ange, and then 2 quite pragmatic managers in Frank and Tudor. And of course, it doesn't work because the squad that you've got is essentially built for Ange. And it's quite funny to me that Roberto De Zerbi came out a couple of weeks ago and said, "I want to get back to the Tottenham that Ange had, and I want to play like that." So it just shows you what a waste of a year this has been from the director of football. And that is I almost think this is more important than the manager at this stage. There is no direction at this football club. It's just a complete mess. And you're completely right. I think when you said earlier about Langer and Vinaya will be gone, I imagine whatever happens, whether we stay up or go down, Langer will be the first one out the door, because he cannot direct this football club going forward. And I think the lack of direction is what's essentially left us in the state that we're in right now.
Without a doubt. And, the interesting thing is the difference between when Pochettino left and Jose came in, and Ange leaving and Thomas Frank coming in, is our squad at the time was so talented that they were able to, they had it in their lockers to be able to switch a little bit from what Pochettino was to what Jose Mourinho was wanting to do, right? There were still patterns of play that, still got forward. And because we had Kane and because we had Son and because we had Dele, we were able to make that shift to be a little bit more defensive minded, and still be able to, to pop out on the counterattack and still be somewhat lethal. Whereas because we were so attack oriented under Ange, and because of the player profile of what we were looking for, which was fast, very pacey, very athletic, but from a passing standpoint, or potentially even from a defensive standpoint, that wasn't the profile of player. So when Thomas Frank comes in and he's like, no, we're not doing that. We're gonna bunker and counter. And surprise, surprise, our players couldn't do it. They just didn't have it.
Yeah, and it's funny. In the years before that, it almost doesn't really matter what direction, what style of player you want to play. Because if you've got Harry Kane, it doesn't really matter, because he's going to win you games by himself, as he has done for years. And then we lose Harry Kane, we get a manager like Ange, who does a good job of that. And yeah, that is definitely right. Spurs die hard, by the way.
Yeah.
And we still have Son. Those two of the best players the Premier League's ever seen, in Son and Kane. And we're almost having the season that we all feared would happen. The moment that we lose those two is that when you lose two players of that quality and don't replace them, you're in big trouble. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's our first season without both of them. We've always had at least one of them to carry us for the last 10 years or so. Two of the best players the Premier League's ever seen, countless goals every season. With Son, even in his worst season, you're getting 15, 20 Premier League goals. And by God, we missed those two. We missed them incredibly.
And prior to that, we had Gareth Bale and we had Luka Modric, and we always had at least one of those. We always had, at least for the last 15, 20 years, we always had at least a focal point on the attack.
And maybe Xavi might turn into that player for us now. Who knows? Let's hope.
Yeah, and by the way, shout out to Xavi. I thought he played well, even though he. I know he missed that goal
on the bench so much this season, isn't it? So.
Yeah, there was a conversation yesterday that I had with Dave and Jack over at the Irish Hotspur, and
great guys.
Yeah, for sure, they're great guys. And I think the question about Xavi came up was like, if Thomas Frank didn't necessarily rate him and sat him, and same thing with Igor Tudor. Like maybe there's something that's in that, because I think Roberto De Zerbi came out and let everybody know straight up. It's like it's not necessarily him. It's like what he does off the ball. And my mentality was, it's like, don't get me wrong, there are certain players that are just not good training players, but yet when a match starts, you actually see some of their good, some of their good play. Like for whatever reason, it's just like there's something that switches when it comes to game time, and when they step on the pitch, you see some of their better qualities. But I also know, as somebody that follows the Dutch national team and also follows certain players throughout their career, man, I saw Xavi Simons, throughout his young career, and I can unequivocally say that he's the type of player that needs to be within 10, 15 feet of goal for him to actually have his best, his best come out, right? He's one of those type of players that if you try to play him wide and you take him away from goal, you're not going to get his best attributes, because he's one of those guys that just perform very well within that confined space of in and around goal. And we saw that yesterday, right? When he was sprung and he was able to get into that position early. Yes, he missed it off the post, but that being said, we saw it in the second half where he's right outside the 18-yard box, cuts in and just puts an absolute missile to the far post. And, we take a lead, and it's like, it is what it is, but he's one of those type of luxury players where you would be lucky to have him, because if he's within 15 feet of the goal, you're going to get good results.
Yeah, and I have to do this. I have to interrupt this broadcast because there's been a Man City goal. So for anyone wondering, there's been a Man City goal, 2-1 to Man City. So there you go. But they're playing Arsenal, right? They're playing Arsenal. That's why I had to drop that news.
Let's go City! Let's go City!
Yeah, so there you go. And I've been a big fan of Xavi. I think sometimes because of his price tag and how. This guy's been in football media since he was a kid, literally 4 years old. Mm-hmm. A massive, massive reputation. I think some people forget that he's 22 sometimes. He's younger than he's younger than Kinski. This guy is 22 years old. He's such a young player. And he has, he's played for PSG and he's played for Barcelona Academy. He's played for big clubs like Leipzig, and now he's come here, and it's his first season in the Premier League, and you can just see there's something there with him. He's always trying to do something, and he's got that shot in the locker, which we saw yesterday. Not the first time he scored one of them. He's incredibly creative. I just can't believe this guy spent so long on the bench this season. I think that's a massive, massive error for the managers. And I think he's one of those players, a bit like, I'm not saying he's as good as this guy because he's not, let's be real, but Cherky. And Guardiola will talk about Cherky all the time and say, well, he's always criticising him almost in every press conference, saying he needs to do more off the ball, he needs to do this and this. And, they have quite a funny relationship, those two, because Guardiola criticises them quite a lot, even though he's obviously an incredible player. But there are some players that what they bring to the game is worth more than what they don't, if you know what I mean. And for me, Xavi
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I understand exactly where I know exactly where De Zerbi's coming from, right? Because there's certain attributes that you have to have in order to make that system work. But that being said, it's like, when you look at the finished product, and yesterday was a perfect example where there are certain points where he absolutely takes over. You know what I mean? And that doesn't happen by accident, right? And so what's funny is, like, is it really a situation of, his movement off the ball? Is that such a problem where you're not going to utilize his talents, or are you just going to trust his ability in the moment, and then all of a sudden you saw exactly what he was able to do, not with the ball at his feet, and yet still with the ball at his feet, he's still able to put himself in a position to be a game changer. Just saying.
And I'm just saying, look at the games when he's not playing. Look at how turgid we are at times, and just how, Sunderland is a prime example of that. We almost created nothing against Sunderland, and he makes things happen. And for me, that's, we need it. So I'm really glad that he played. I'm really glad that he scored. And I really, really hope that he could be the man to drag us out of the next, 5 games. And if we can win a few of them, then we have a chance of staying up, even if, that chance is becoming increasingly small.
What I like is, by the time that we hit Everton, and hopefully we will have Maddison at least back in the fold for at least half, 45 minutes to 60 minutes.
Imagine if we by the time we as well. Remember him?
Oh man, I would love it. But and by the way, as far as I'm concerned, like when we are 100% healthy, our best passers are probably Kulusevski, Maddison, and probably Xavi.
Which is why I do, I feel for any managers having none of those all season is tough. But yeah, I'm not sure we will see Kulusevski even this season, to be honest.
I would agree. But if we can get Maddison back for at least 45 to 60 by the time we hit Leeds, and imagine having essentially a scenario where we have 2 high 10s with Maddison and Xavi for 60 minutes, 60 of the 90. And actually having those two guys with ability, their on-ball ability, and the creative outlets that they're going to be able to provide. All of a sudden now, the idea of chance creation or the idea of service into the box, all of a sudden, all those bad vibes and all those bad headlines go away. And at that point, it's like, okay, cool. Granted, we're not going to have too many matches left in the bank, but that being said, it's like, if we're able to get those 2 guys on the pitch at the same time, our chances of getting points and staying up exponentially go through the roof. Like, I can't wait for Maddison to get back on the pitch. Just the idea of those 2 together, good Lord, we're going to score goals.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is Maddison's our best player. I think he's unbelievable. I think he's fantastic. He's my favourite player. I think he's our best player. And if we can just get him for, Villa, Everton, Chelsea, that's a huge difference. Even if it's just for half of. It's just, the things that we've been lacking all season, a bit of spark, a bit of creativity, a bit of magic.
I would agree.
He can do those things. And I think he's equally important as his personality as well. He's a leader in a time that we're bereft of leadership at the moment on the pitch. And, I really would like to see him back. And it's just a shame. It would just be such a different season if we had Maddison and Kulusevski this season. I really don't think we'd be anywhere near where we are right now. And, we've lost 2 of our very best players, probably our 2 best players. You'd make a very strong case for that for the entire season. And it's essentially killed us. But I would say to that, because we've had 2 transfer windows to rectify that, and we didn't.
I wasn't going to be the one to bring it up, but we can't have a podcast unless we have to bring up the fact that we've been absolute dog shit in the transfer window, especially this last January. Good God. All right, man, because we got about a 10-ish minutes left on this show today, and I do want to talk about between now and the end of the season. We have I think we have like what, 5 remaining
games, yeah.
5 games remaining.
Leeds, Aston Villa, No, we have
Wolves.
got Wolves, Aston Villa, Leeds, Chelsea, and Everton.
And obviously, I believe 5 times 3 means 15 points. And so with the remaining 15 points that are out there, Roberto De Zerbi has lofty expectations. He's talking about going on a 5-game unbeaten streak, 5 straight wins, taking those 15 points and staying up. That being said, as fun as that is to think, our record at the bridge isn't great. Now, granted, over the last 5 to 10 years, our record at Villa Park has actually been pretty decent. But that being said, it's like, when you're looking at the rest of the schedule, realistically, how many points are out there, Billy?
I think we need 3 wins to stay up. And that's when you're on the face of it, when you say that in a team that's gone 15 games without a win, to suddenly win 3 out of 5 sounds unbelievable, doesn't it? Literally unbelievable. I mean, the word literally unbelievable. It sounds like just ridiculous. You're going from 0 ones in 15 to 3 and 5. But if you look at the fixtures, if you look at yesterday, the way we played, if we can do that again, I think we win the next 2 games, Wolves and Leeds. I think we beat both of them. Leeds will be safe by then. They won again this weekend. Nothing to play for. They survived. They've got an FA Cup semi-final to look forward to. I think we win both games. The problem is we need to win. Wolves is a tricky one because we have a shocking record against Wolves. We haven't beat them in 6 games. We have a terrible record there, absolutely horrendous record there. But they're essentially relegated. I think they might even be relegated. I think they're, with the West Ham games, they are relegated. So there's that one there. And then, if we can win that one, then we just have to win one more of Chelsea, Everton, and Aston Villa. Those are 3 really tricky games, though. So it's really touch and go at the moment. It's really, really touch and go. On a normal season, if you'd have said if you beat Wolves away, you are relegated. If you beat Leeds at home and if you beat Everton at home, you survive. You'd think, fine, that's no problem. But in the context of this season, where we've won 0 in 15. It's really tricky, so it's difficult. But I think we need 3 wins to survive, and I think we win the next 2. It's just the next 3 after that are tricky.
I would agree, and I think that it starts with the messaging, because I think yesterday was more positive than negative. Even though we gave up the equalizer late, but that being said, it's like, look at from De Zerbi's standpoint, that has to be the messaging, right? Because from my standpoint, the effort was there. And when you actually have those type of performances, there's something to build off. And that's something that's got to be the messaging. And especially to a guy like Kevin Danso, who unfortunately was the guy that, that lost that 1v1 late. But that being said, it's like, De Zerbi seems to be that type of guy who does actually have that ability to put an arm around the shoulder and be like, let it go. It's not the end of the world. And from a team standpoint, if you're looking at it as a whole, it's like, dude, this is our best performance from whistle to whistle, right? And all of a sudden it's like, okay, great. Now we actually do have Wolves. And it's like, from that performance yesterday, and it starts right there at the Molineux. And I understand we're not exactly great against Wolves, but that being said, it's like, yeah, okay, great. They might be looking, to get one over, but it starts right there with Wolves. And if we're able to get that 3 points, the only thing that I will say is that against Villa and against Chelsea, we can't lose.
Yeah.
If that means it's a draw, it's okay, fine. But the reality is we can't lose any of these next 5. And for me, it comes down to Leeds and Everton. And again, 2 teams that are going to be up. Everton is Everton.
I hate to be playing for Champions League football at that point as well. I know they lost today, though, but they're in touching distance of 5th place. Yeah,
they are in touching distance with 5th place, so they actually have something to play for. But at the end of the day, it's like, I still think that, roster comparisons with each other, the talent is on Spurs' side. Yeah. And now that Roberto De Zerbi, at least in my opinion, I feel like he's the guy that's finally unlocked this roster and has gotten them playing a style of football that they're comfortable with. And even after here's the thing. It's like, when you look at the emotion yesterday, after Xavi scored that goal, dude, it was beautiful. It was something that we hadn't seen. The atmosphere was perfect. The players were on a high. And even when they conceded, though, I still didn't think that it was. I still think it didn't negate it didn't negate the good feelings of that goal. And so the point is, me personally, it's like it all depends on how they take from yesterday. Do they take it as a negative? Do they take it as a loss, or do they take it as something that they can build upon? Because one of the things they weren't able to do is after that Liverpool match, they weren't able to build upon that draw at Anfield. So that for me is the entirety of the situation. How do they respond to this one from yesterday? Because if they respond to it well, we're going to get that result at Wolves, and at that point, we're off to the races.
Yeah, completely. And De Zerbi said in his press conference after the game, didn't he? He said if anyone doesn't come into training smiling, they have to go home on Monday, because he was really proud of the performance. And I hope the players take that into them. And Brighton are an excellent team. We can't forget that. They're first in the form table. They won 5 out of 6 games. As we said earlier, they've beaten Liverpool recently. Very unluckily lost to Arsenal. So it was a really good performance in the context of what we've seen this season. So there's a lot to build on there. And I do hope, I think our problem, it's not necessarily tactical, and it's not necessarily, a player issue. It's confidence. These guys are so low on confidence, and I think they can take some confidence out of yesterday. I really do. And the equalizer would have hurt them. It would have hurt them, but there's a lot there to work with. And I think De Zerbi will be really trying to bring on that this week, that, it was the first time in a long time we played like an actual Tottenham team.
Very quickly, big shout out to Big Tones, Tony Kinski. By the way, I thought Tony Kinski, he had a brilliant performance. I think he built off that Sunderland match. And I didn't think that goal against Sunderland was necessarily his fault. That redirection, I don't think any keeper was going to get that. But I actually thought that Tony played a very good match yesterday. And a couple of those, the 2 goals that were conceded, it is what it is, man. But when you're looking at the overall body of work, he was good with the ball at his feet. When they were playing out of the back, he didn't look like he was nervy at all. He looked like a confident young goalkeeper. And so shout out to Tony Kinski.
And if you want, if Kevin Danso is going to, move on from this mistake that he made, then Kinski is the perfect example, right? You've just got to get to the next game, put in a good performance, and this thing, you quickly leave that behind you.
Exactly, man. And hopefully Tony can use this opportunity to put out a resume and show De Zerbi that he's more than capable of being one of the guys that are going to be in the competition for starting keeper next season. That's that is the high level that Tony needs to be looking at, right? Like if you can put together a nice little solid resume between now and the end of the season, and just let De Zerbi know, like, hey, dude, I'm more than capable. That would be perfect for Tony.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think, if Vicario's fit, then he will come back into the team? I have my gut feeling is Kinski stays in the team now.
You think so?
I think so, just because of how much better he is with his feet. But Vicario he could be back for the next game, or even Aston Villa. So it'd be an interesting decision, won't it?
So here's the thing, right? My biggest issue with Vicario is that he's nervy. Yeah, that's the thing I don't like about him, right? Like, he's an unbelievable shot stopper from inside the box. Like, he really is. Like, I'm not gonna I can't necessarily criticize him, because like when it comes to point blank shots with inside 8 feet, like, he's actually really good. His problem is, like, sometimes he gets nervy on his line on set pieces, and he can't defend outside.
For the rest of the team, doesn't it? Everyone else gets nervous around him.
That's exactly right. And also from shots outside the box, he cannot for his life save a shot from outside the box. But then, one of the things that I did notice about Tony Kinski is the fact that, like, he seems very confident with the ball at his feet. And we also have to remember that he's 21, 22 as well, too. Yep. He's not a finished product whatsoever. I think Adrian just said it right here in the chat. He said he doesn't wander out of this penalty area like Vicario does. 100%. I would 100% co-sign that as well, too.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what happens of the two of them when he comes back.
I would like to see Tony get a run. Because one of the things that we hadn't seen is Tony just get a nice little spell of games. Like, if you remember last year when he came in, like his first match right out the gate was Liverpool. And then he had a North London derby at the Emirates, and then he had an FA Cup at Villa Park before Vicario came back. And I think this year his 2 matches were against Newcastle.
Yep.
Newcastle in the league, in the League Cup, and then Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. And it's like, dude, it's like he's 21, 21,
Yeah.
22. It's like that's not exactly a soft landing for a young goalkeeper coming from the Czech Republic. But that being said, it's like in a relegation scrap, right? That technically should bring the best out of every single player, right? And so that's kind of what I'm curious to see with Tony. It's like, how does he stack up on the pressure of a relegation scrap? Because generally you have to dig down to reach and get yourself to a level. I'm curious to see what that looks. I wonder what that next level looks like with Tony Kinski. So I would like to see him get a run between now and the end of the season. 100%.
Yeah, me too. I think I would as well. And obviously there's only a handful of games, but it would just be interesting to see what happens when Vicario comes back. But for me, I think Kinski's done enough in the first 2 games to stake a claim.
Yeah, I do too. Lastly, I do got to ask you this question because I wanted to know if you noticed this. So yesterday on the broadcast, and of course over here in the States, it's Peacock, that the match was broadcast, and they shot to the owner's box a few times, and Vivian Lewis was there sitting right next to Vinny Venkatesham, but there was somebody that was missing from that owner's box. I wonder if you noticed that.
I did not notice that. I assume you're talking about Langer. Yeah,
and
I
was not there.
I have seen a couple of, we're in a few group chats together. I see a few messages in those group chats rumoring that Langer has been sacked. So,
yep.
I hope he's not there. To be honest with you, I mean, he shouldn't be allowed to be there. He's, been a catastrophic failure for this football club. So, interesting. I did not notice that, but I hope he has been fired. I certainly don't want him to be anywhere near the stadium.
Yeah, and it was absolutely noticeable as well too.
He was there at Sunderland, wasn't he? He was there.
I think so. And one of the interesting things was the fact that it brought a smile to my face as well too, because usually those two, both Langer and Vinny Venkatesham are right, literally lock and step with each other. And so for him not to be in that box yesterday was very noticeable. And I've heard the same rumor as well too, that he's done at the end of the season. And if that's the case, man, here's the thing, like, even if we go down, I'm super happy because at the end of the day, I think he's already proven that this level is just a little too big for him, and that he does not know how to build a Big Six club. So hopefully that is a sign of things to come, because quite honestly, to be in the position that we're at with this club, as big as this club is, in terms of revenue and just stature, to be driven into the ground the way that we've been driven. It's an absolute shame. It's an absolute shame that we're at this, that we actually have to come on and do these podcasts and talk about, like, will we go down, right? Are we going to stay up? Or, like, I never thought I'd actually, don't get me wrong. It's been since the 90s since we've actually been in a true relegation scrap.
Yeah.
We haven't been relegated since the 70s. Right. So it's like, it's like, it's just, for me, it's a shock. Like, I never thought I'd actually see a relegation scrap with Spurs.
Yeah, and can I just say, I think European sports need to take a leaf out of American sports book and stop relegation. I think we need to become like the MLS, no more relegation. I think you want to get rid of promotion relegation, or are you just saying that tongue in cheek, or are you actually I'm serious? Saying that tongue in cheek so Spurs don't get relegated. Okay. But, okay. This is probably why we tried to join the Super League, isn't it? Because then we can't get relegated.
Yeah, for sure. Among many other reasons, for sure. But yeah, financial.
Do any American sports have relegation? It's not really a thing over there.
No.
Right? Yeah.
No, not so. In
20 of this, what we're going through right now.
Well, in 2027, 2028, the USL is going to implement promotion relegation inside their ranks as a trial run. And eventually what the plan is they're going to open up the pyramid behind them. Major League Soccer is still going to be a closed entity. But that being said, it's like when they launch their first division with promotion and relegation, the aim is to make sure that American investors stay in America instead of going to England, France, whatever the case may be. And the idea is to compete head to head with Major League Soccer. So we'll see exactly how it plays out, but that would be the first.
I wish there was no relegation this season for us.
I would like to see it, because of me personally, I think it just improves the game so well. And we're starting to see now all over England just what the promotion and relegation battles are doing. not only for the Premier League, but also in the Championship, League One, League Two, and even the non-league as well too. I love it. I love it when teams get promoted from the non-league into the football league. Yeah, for sure. It's great storylines, and it's also fun TV as well too. So
yeah, and I think we're potentially looking at one of the biggest, if not the second biggest football story in the Premier League history if we go down. So
that would be, it would be.
I think it's second behind Leicester only, personally, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, 100%. And by the way, I think Leicester's going down again, aren't they?
Yeah, they are essentially down. So let's pray that. I mean, I don't think that would ever happen to us, but it just shows you how you can do it. They won the FA Cup not long ago. Now they're in the Champions League a few years ago, and now they're going to be in League One.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're fundamentally mismanaged to the point where all of a sudden you find
financial security behind us. But
good Lord, man, good Lord, I hope that doesn't happen. But I'll tell you what, my dream is to see Torquay United back in the football league. That would be unbelievable if Torquay can go up, man. So
yeah, I have a friend. I have my girlfriend's colleague is a big York fan, so I've been following that league quite closely this year. And
there you go.
York are just about to be promoted as well.
Yeah, that'd be. Yeah, by the way, congratulations to York. Shout out to York. It actually does change. It does change the fortunes of a football club. When you actually get into the. Yeah, I mean, look at Wrexham.
I was about to say, look at Wrexham, man. It's not going to be long before they're in the Premier League. I don't think
it might just happen this season.
Yeah,
I think they're what, like a point off the off the playoff spots in the Championship. Yeah, for sure.
And but we're about 8 places of playoffs. So Spurs should definitely make that in some way or other.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that's right. I forgot about that. They're expanding to 8.
I mean, hopefully we don't have to worry about that though.
Hopefully we stay up. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us, Billy. Is there any last thing?
No, I just always enjoy chatting to you, my friend, and
I appreciate it, man.
We get a win. Pray that we get a win to talk about next time.
Is there anything coming down the pipe with change for Tottenham?
There certainly is. We've got big plans for Leeds and Everton, so watch this space for that. But there certainly is. We're just starting to put something together today, actually. So I'm excited by it. I've got the bug. It's been a difficult time at the moment because you can see that fans are just really desperate to get behind the team, and the atmosphere yesterday was unbelievable. By the way,
I know it was.
That was in the season, so it's really difficult with the timing of protests and stuff like that. But we've got some ideas in the pipeline. So watch this space for Leeds and Everton for sure.
Absolutely. And by the way, for those that are tuning in the link in the bio, I have the X accounts for not only you, Billy, but also for Change for Tottenham as well too. So yeah, absolutely. So with any
for Everton and Leeds plans.
So yeah, definitely check that out on X at Change for Tottenham as well too. But I'll just say this, that whatever happens going forward, what I will say is that at the end of the day, man, we're still all Spurs fans, and the most important thing is the well-being of this club. And I understand it's not the most ideal situation, but at the end of the day, it's like if we stay up, fantastic. If we go down, again, not ideal. But that being said, it's like there are far more positives than there are negatives, and I would probably assume that regardless of whatever happens, man, better days are actually in front of us instead of and it'll be behind us. And yeah, at the end of the day, man, what's most important is not who's to blame. It's about getting behind this team and making sure that we end up staying up, and our good fortunes will continue. It seems like we have the right head coach, and hopefully we can build upon what we've seen through these first 2 matches under Roberto De Zerbi, because it looks promising. And if you if you're a calm-headed, rational fan, and you're looking at it for what it is, man, this is the first time we've actually seen a heartbeat on the pitch in a very long time. And for me, that's exceptionally encouraging. So
agree completely, my friend. Could not say it better myself.
That's going to do it for us, Billy. I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your Sunday. I'm sure you had leisurely activities planned for the day, but nonetheless, man, I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I've just been keeping an eye on Man City Arsenal, so there's 7 minutes to go. So
let's go City, man. This bottle job has to be complete. Yeah. This has to be complete, and Arsenal cannot lift this goddamn trophy. it just cannot, seriously, it just cannot happen. I cannot live in a world where Arsenal are Premier League champions. I'm sorry. I can't handle it. Big up to Dan Davenport, who's in the chat. Adrian from Spurs Diehards TTID, Tommy K 3436, and everybody else that was tuning in. Shout out to all the homies that are on X tuning in, and also those that are tuning in from YouTube as well too. Please do me a favor and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any upcoming content coming out your way. And of course, make sure that you hop on over and say what's up to Billie T on X, because even if you just want to say what's up or you want to talk ball, Billie's, you're go out of your way to make sure that you have those conversations. I know you do.
Always.
Excellent, man. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon, and I hope it goes well. And I will see you will see you on Tuesday. And again, look out for those posts because we do have a couple guests coming on, and it should be fun. So we'll see you next time. Have a great day, guys.